Welcome to my video. First, who am I? The answer is, just one of a few robotic voices who will be doing the rounds. But who is the author? Just an ordinary gentleman called Stefan, British-born to parents from the former Yugoslavia. These videos aim to explain subjects of a political theme often discussed in current affairs and in YouTube videos, but rarely precise while always pushing some form of agenda. The giveaway sign of inaccuracy is when one resorts to the common but lazy word, complicated. That region's affairs are virtually always complicated. And why are they complicated? Perhaps because the narrator is not telling the whole story. Perhaps even the so-called experts leave out uncomfortable actualities, which means questions remain unanswered. People with a genuine interest somehow run into a wall. And the only way around it is...
It does, and it doesn't make sense at the same time. It's just complicated, I guess.
Well, I'm here to tell you, no, it isn't. Things could hardly be more straightforward. While most of my videos focus on some element of the former Yugoslavia, some are based away from this region. Now, let me clarify that the author is not a historian, nor a scholar, and does not claim to be qualified in anything that goes out from these videos. He is merely an enthusiast who spends a lot of time and effort deconstructing common narratives. Don't let that put you off, for his message to you is exactly what every professional worth his weight in gold ought to be saying, though few actually will. Don't believe what I tell you. Instead, research for yourself the things you're hearing. And if I've got something wrong, then feel free to collate your own evidence, link it if you can, or if not, just mention it in the comments whereupon the author will happily explore it. We begin with today's topic based on the Macedonian people, namely those Slavic-speaking communities associated with the former Yugoslavia. The Greek perspective suggests Slavs cannot be Macedonian. Therefore, the nation to the north of Greece is using a misnomer. They continue.
These people are pure Slavs, just pretending to be Macedonians. There's no ancient link. They're just Bulgarians in disguise.
That last one, also heavily articulated by Bulgarians. So, they just see an entire people committing fraud. Many of these Slavic-speaking Macedonians indeed lean into the legacy of Alexander the Great, imagining themselves as heirs to ancient Macedonia. The standard Greek rebuttal aimed at shutting down this claim by those Macedonians is to quote Macedonia's first post-independence president, Kiro Gligorov, who famously said,
"We are Slavs. We are not descendants of the ancient Macedonians."
Greeks and their apologists look upon this assertion as conclusive, the definitive statement that settles the issue. But since when did being a president suddenly make you a historian, or a geneticist, or even some arbiter on identity? Well, yes, Gligorov did view the nation as Slavic. But, was Gligorov alone in this perception? Curiously, a great many Macedonians do proudly embrace a Slavic identity. As such, they see their former Yugoslav partners as family. They look to Russia with cultural affection. They further regard all Slavic peoples as kin. Among Macedonians, there is thereby no single view of who they are. That said, there have to date been no studies which determine the ratio. Those claiming ancient Macedonian descent, as opposed to those accepting Slavic heritage. But one thing is for sure, these two concepts are mutually incompatible. It's one or the other. Regardless whom this will upset, the maker of this video is one who accepts these Macedonians as Slavic, therefore not descended from the Macedonians of antiquity. Oddly, this isn't good enough. For even when a Macedonian says that his people are Slavic, the Greek response is then to deny that the name Macedonian is applicable to these individuals. I'll come back to this one, but for now, let us shift our attention to the part of the population which does see itself as being descended from the ancient Macedonians. The first challenge to these people is,
well, if you are Macedonians, descendants of Alexander, why is it that you speak a blatantly Slavic language? Well, if you are Macedonians, descendants of Alexander, why is it that you speak a blatantly Slavic language?
To answer this, first, those people know that their language is Slavic, just as they know that their own names are also Slavic in origin, particularly the suffix "ski."
Their response:
when the Slavic tribes settled in the region, those Macedonians became linguistically assimilated, while names happened to be a property of language, thereby following suit. But these Macedonians claim also to have held onto their heritage despite changing language and subsequent personal name system. What now does a Greek, or anyone else, say to a person who has just made this remark? If the answer is merely,
"No, you're not, you are Slavs,"
then that arguer has just backed himself into a corner, since the point is now moot.
you say one thing, I say another.
Round and round, ad infinitum. The alternate Macedonian, meanwhile, who has accepted being Slavic, is no more going to hold up symbolism which impersonates ancient Greece than he would have done prior to 1991, when Macedonia functioned precisely as a Slavic entity within a Slavic union. Another common Greek objection is geography. They say that the former Yugoslav Republic is too far north. Ancient Macedonia was further south in what is now Greek territory. But so what? Nations are not anchored to the outline of the Bronze Age. If people call themselves Macedonian and the name holds meaning for them today, then Philip and Alexander's capital is a footnote, not a veto, just as the coordinates of their one-time capital has become inapposite. History moves. People change. Then comes the famous claim that Macedonians are, quote-unquote, Bulgarians, because that is how their ancestors identified. To that, there is a limited amount of truth, but one that needs to be taken cautiously and not swallowed unconditionally. Just because some document reveals that someone's great-grandfather declared himself Bulgarian, the reality doesn't suddenly become less elaborate. Let's take the modern capital, Skopje, known in Ottoman times by its Turkish name, Üsküp. As Üsküp, it has an article in the 1911 Britannica Encyclopedia. Its population is reported around 32,000, and it is named as the capital of the then Vilayet of Kosovo. Its population is recorded as distinctly having a South Slavic majority, these being Bulgarians and Serbs. Well, many grandparents of today's population in Skopje clearly did not use the designation Macedonian to identify themselves, but not all declared Bulgarian neither. Many respondents said they were Serbian. What this shows is that ethnicity is fluid and not concrete. Bulgaria can look to Macedonia as unredeemed territory, but so can Serbia on that same premise. The region in question, known as the Vardar Basin, had historically been part of both empires, Bulgarian and Serbian. Certainly, during the April Uprising of 1876, where Bulgarians rose up against the Ottomans, the population of Strumitsa, today in eastern Macedonia, took part in the revolt. Similarly, the Kumanovo Uprising of 1878 against the Ottomans, which occurred in Kumanovo, Kriva Palanka and Kratovo, all today in Macedonia's north, had been a pro-Serbian uprising. The next joint Bulgarian-Greek premise aimed at discrediting Slavic-speaking Macedonians holds that the Macedonian ethnic designation was quote-unquote invented by Tito, Yugoslavia's post-World War II leader. They allude to the inclusion of a Macedonian republic, Macedonian ethnicity, and a distinct Macedonian language which would come to compose Yugoslavia's internal structure only since 1944. They note that 5 centuries ago, no local Slavic person had used the demonym Macedonian in relation to himself. Well, we have established that only 30 years before this milestone, the people of the region were identifying either as Serb or as Bulgarian, if not other things depending where and in which circumstance. Much of this has to do with the wider manner in which ethnicity was viewed and treated down the centuries. But do Macedonians stand alone here? Among fellow South Slavic nations, there were no Montenegrins once upon a time, nor Bosniaks, or Muslims by nationality as they are commonly known. While further afield, even Ukrainians and Belarusians are relative Johnny-come-latelys in the world of Slavic ethnic groups. Then, outside of the Slavic world, one can consider Moldovans, who were previously Romanian, or Azerbaijanis, who were originally Turkish. The list just grows and grows. It is a fact that during communist times, reapportioning of national identity took place across many countries. Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union both encouraged and financially supported the development of newly formed nations. While across the former Eastern Bloc, there were other proposals for new nations among existing populations, which for one reason or another did not launch. So think what you like, there simply is no reason to build a circus around Macedonians. As for the name having been stolen, just remember, demonyms can also come to fruition being based on long-standing toponyms. To give two prominent examples, the Proto-Normans were a Germanic people with a Germanic language. By the time of the 1066 Battle of Hastings, people known as Norman would by now speak a distinct regional variety of French, a Romance language. Without such people mixing with Romance-speaking people, thereby those Romance speakers forming a part of their ancestry, there is no way an unadulterated band of Germanic people would suddenly be speaking a Romance language. So, how did the 1066 people come to be called Normans? More than likely, because the name Normandy stuck as the name for the territory, and so in time whatever emerged from this zone came to be a nuanced form of Norman. But it doesn't stop there either. Even the name of the French, in other words, the Franks, were a Germanic people to begin with, prior to the Frankish historical involvement with Latin speakers who ended up being the more resilient of the two groups linguistically, but keeping the name of the land for themselves, and finally identifying as French as a consequence. Now let's zoom in on Macedonia itself. In the north, you have a city and municipality called Kuman-Ovo. From where does it derive its name? From the Turkic Kumans, a population to have lived in the region historically. In Macedonian, the local name for a male person of this municipality is a Kuman of Ets. But Kuman-Ovo's demographics report a Macedonian majority and a large Albanian minority before others begin to register, such as those continuing to identify as Serb. But none of these people are Turkic, are they? So if a Slavic person is wrong to call himself Macedonian, surely then, he is also wrong to identify at a local level as a Kuman of Ets, because the Kumans were Turkic. Anyhow, Kumans have given their name to settlements far and wide, from Comunești in Romania to Kuman, a city located in China. But was it really the case that Tito, or Comintern, a portmanteau of Communist International dating to 1919, created the Macedonian nation, as many Greeks and Bulgarians claim? Due to either deliberate or clumsy oversights, many fail to realize that the answer to that stares everybody in the face, in the local region no less. Josip Broz Tito administered Yugoslavia. That was all. Ethnic Macedonians are native beyond the borders of the former Yugoslavia. In 3 sectors of eastern Albania along the border with Macedonia, live autochthonous Macedonian communities who raise the flags and symbols associated with those of the former Yugoslavia. The most notable of these is in the Gorica region of Albania, beside Lake Prespar, with the settlement of Pustets being the main cultural center for those Macedonians in Albania. Here, road signs are bilingual in Albanian and Macedonian across about 10 villages, indicating the fact that Albania's Macedonians are recognized as a national minority by Albania's government, and in consequence, enjoy some minority privileges, including use of language in this region. Albania may not have been led by Tito, but it did have a communist leadership post-World War II. And so this still leaves the question that Comintern might have been the creator of a Macedonian Slavic ethnicity. To this, we move to another country. It is called Greece. Never led by Tito, and not to have had a communist government. Thereby, 100% divorced from Comintern. And yet, Slavophonic persons identifying as Macedonian can be found from the Greek border with former Yugoslavia, right the way to the Aegean shoreline. Albeit in smaller numbers the further one moves south. And just in case somebody tries to twist the presence of native Slavophonic persons in Greece by claiming these to be, quote-unquote, Bulgarians, then here is all you need to know to disabuse yourself of that crazy idea. Those Slavic people have an establishment operating from the northern Greek town of Florina. Its name is the center for the Macedonian, repeat, Macedonian, language in Greece. Established 2022. It is not called Center for Bulgarian language. And the language used for the promotion of the development of these citizens of Greece is most proximately the same Macedonian as that spoken in the country to the north, and not the national language of the Republic of Bulgaria. Regarding the former Yugoslavia, Tito gave these people recognition. He gave them space. But he sure did not invent them. Finally, let's take a closer look at why it would not be adequate to call this community Bulgarian, and here we will explore the linguistic issue as well. Deniers of a Slavic people as Macedonian is often accompanied by the claim of Macedonian being a mere dialect of Bulgarian. As said earlier, people of modern-day Macedonia did to some extent declare their ethnicity Bulgarian at the start of the 20th century. First, the claim of Macedonian being a dialect of Bulgarian ontologically suggests that across a sector, one language is spoken but with two standards, both being a dialect of one postulated language. Yet, the question of whether this language should be called Bulgarian, when no speaker to use Macedonian calls himself Bulgarian, is a concept on shaky ground right from the get-go. It is said that Portuguese and Galician of northwestern Spain are two dialects of a single language, but that no more makes the language in question, called Portuguese, than it does Galician. Looking at this example, you see that a language does not even require a name if it is spoken in multiple dialects across multiple countries or regions. Macedonian is argued to be pure Bulgarian, but with words imported from Serbian which constitute the differences between Macedonian and Bulgarian. So here is the background to modern-day Bulgarian and Macedonian. Myth-busting time. Bulgarian is based on the dialect of a region in the middle of Bulgaria, centered on Veliko Turnovo. The territory chosen for Macedonia's standard dialect is located in the southern half of the country, namely the Pelagonia statistical region. All speakers of Bulgarian and Macedonian form a part of the wider South Slavic dialect continuum, which incorporates the varieties of Serbo-Croatian and Slovenian, which is where the continuum comes to an end. One reason Macedonian might use words associated with Serbian is because, when traveling west from Veliko Turnovo, Bulgaria's linguistic hub, the word in question may begin to be used from a region prior to the cutoff point where Macedonian is based, sometimes within Bulgaria's borders. So, it doesn't mean that the word was imported into Macedonian from Serbian. Macedonian actually has a vast word stock which do not form a part of either Bulgarian nor Serbian, while at times, it is Bulgarian which might have the same word as Serbian.
So, I guess Bulgarian is pure Macedonian but with Serbian borrowings which constitute the difference.
Well, that would be the reverse logic. But no, each language is its own, and based on a region within one's borders. But even if Macedonians began reverting to calling themselves Bulgarian, so long as these people speak a language based within their own borders, this still would not suddenly turn this dialect into a variation of the conventional Bulgarian. But it would certainly raise the scientific question as to whether all Bulgarians speak the same language given their now wider distribution. It so happens that Macedonian, with its unique vocabulary, lexical divergence, and other distinctions including being the only Slavic language to have 3 definite articles, is more different from Bulgarian than what Norwegian is from Danish. Yet, nobody calls Norwegian a dialect of Danish, nor vice versa. Ergo, in 2025, Bulgarian and Macedonian are 2 languages spoken by 2 nations. Macedonian and Bulgarian are, by all accounts, very similar and oftentimes mutually intelligible. This has been another reason some analysts have compartmentalized Macedonian as a form of Bulgarian. So, let us put an end to this Bulgarian name fantasy once and for all. So far, we've shown why Macedonians themselves have no obligation toward a Bulgarian identity. But, let's look at whether even Bulgarians are justified in calling their own selves Bulgarian. A reminder, why was the term Macedonian denigrated originally? Because it takes the name of a people historically associated with Greece. So what then is different about Bulgarians? Their language and concomitant names are Slavic. However, the Proto-Bulgars were not a Slavic people. That means, when the first Bulgarian Empire came into being, it was not a Slavic state. Slavs lived in it, and the Bulgars in turn ended up assimilating. They became assimilated across their sector which ran right up the Dinaric Alps, which are east of the Adriatic, and into northern Italy. As a result, Bulgaria and its future incarnations developed a Slavic characteristic, as Slavs took over the running of the empire, but kept the name Bulgaria, much like the earlier Norman description. In other words, Bulgarians are no different to Macedonians in this sense. The fact that Slavs coexisted with Bulgars, but never with original Macedonians, while the length of time a Slavic language and culture has flourished with the name Bulgarian, are merely distinctions but not differences. When one claims you can't be Macedonian because you are not Greek, so are therefore, quote-unquote Bulgarian, he is automatically ascribing tribal value to the notion of Bulgarian, where none exists. It assumes Bulgarian is a unique species of individual. The Bulgarian, like the Macedonian, is welcome to consider himself Slavic, or Bulgar, per its original Turkic origin. There is insufficient evidence to suggest that every Bulgarian is necessarily a hybrid of the two origins. And nor could such a phenomenon be contained purely among Bulgarians because Bulgars dwelled and assimilated thousands of miles remote from where one calls oneself Bulgarian. So if he wants to be Bulgar, it's goodbye to being Slavic, despite having a Slavic name and language. If he wants to be Slavic, then he would be wise to remember that the name Bulgarian came to his people after Slavs settled in the region. So, if the day should come he is able to trace his ancestry, the notion of being a Slavic-speaking person with ancestors identifying as Bulgarian can only travel back so far. Then, he reaches a fork in the timeline, whereby his ancestors either cease to speak a Slavic tongue or cease to be Bulgars. There is no other possibility. That is the Macedonian model redux, but with varying intricacy. Of course, it should be noted that Bulgarian and Macedonian do share various properties which set them apart from the rest of the Slavic languages. These include having definite articles which the rest of the Slavic languages don't have. Likewise, Bulgarian and Macedonian do not have the noun declensions which the other Slavic tongues all maintain. This reason for these similarities is not because everybody across the region is Bulgarian. It is rather due to distinction as Slavic people which predates any association between Slavs and the original Bulgars. That is to say, the journey taken by the linguistic ancestors of today's Slavs in arriving in their regions. In summary, Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs are said to be West-South Slavs, having arrived in their modern homelands having crossed the Carpathians. Modern-day Bulgarians and Macedonians are said to be East-South Slavs, having travelled down the western shores of the Black Sea before moving westward into the Vardar Basin and also the whole of Greece. But many of those to settle in Greece anywhere south of the Macedonia region would become assimilated over time. The separate routes taken by the Slavic tribes denotes the language beginning to diverge earlier. Further developed patterns with neighbouring languages such as Romanian, Greek and Albanian also help to characterize the East-South Slavic languages as distinct from the West-South Slavic tongues. Worth noting is the fact that the southern region of Serbia does not get a free pass here. The southern Serbian dialect shows that the original population were part of this eastern group of South Slavs and not Western. That whole territory, in fact, exemplifies where Eastern and Western South Slavs would re-emerge together and overlap one another linguistically. Locally, the Slavic people of this region came to be known as Torlaks, and in consequence, Torlakian is the name of the local dialect. This dialect is centered on the tripoint of Bulgaria, Macedonia and Serbia, thus spoken on all three sides of it, and is an unusual mix of East-South Slavic, meaning Bulgarian, and Macedonian, with West-South Slavic, meaning Standard Serbian for the lands in question. And there you have the similarities. In the next video, we will explore why the author of this video continues to use the name Macedonia in reference to the country that bears the constitutional name, Republic of North Macedonia. We will explore the elaborate nature of the name change, what truly led to it, and what are the conventions surrounding the post-2019 amendment. Until then, feel free to leave your comments. I wish you all a great day. Regards for now.